In the golden halls of Constantinople, where East met West and Christianity battled paganism, an impossible legend was born. Harald Hardrada, a Viking prince exiled from Norway, arrived in the Byzantine capital with nothing but his sword and burning ambition. Within a decade, this northern barbarian would command the emperor's personal guard, amass wealth beyond imagination, and come closer to the Purple Throne than any foreigner before or since. This is the saga of how a landless Viking warrior conquered the most powerful empire on earth through cunning, courage, and blood. Before this epic tale unfolds across the marble halls of history, subscribe, like, and share this story of ultimate ambition. Now, let the chronicle begin. Harald Sigurdsson was born to rule. As half-brother to Saint Olaf, the King of Norway, young Harald grew up in the royal halls of Nidaros, learning statecraft alongside swordplay. But destiny had darker plans. When Magnus the Good seized the Norwegian throne in 1035, Harald found himself branded an enemy of the state, forced to flee his homeland with a price on his head. At barely 20 years old, the exiled prince gathered a band of loyal warriors and sailed east, following the ancient route down the Dnieper River that Vikings called the Road to the Greeks. Constantinople beckoned like a distant star, the richest city in the world, where a man with nothing could forge his fortune in gold and blood. The journey was treacherous. Harald's longships navigated rapids that had claimed countless vessels, fought off attacks from Pecheneg horsemen, and endured the bitter cold of the Russian steppes. Many of his men perished along the way, but those who survived were forged into something harder than steel, a brotherhood bound by shared suffering and unshakable loyalty to their young prince. When Harald finally gazed upon the massive walls of Constantinople rising from the Bosphorus, he saw not just a city, but opportunity incarnate. The Byzantine Empire was vast but bleeding, beset by enemies on all fronts and plagued by internal strife. The emperors desperately needed warriors who could fight, and Vikings were the finest soldiers gold could buy. But Harald wasn't interested in mere mercenary work. From the moment he set foot on Byzantine soil, his ice-blue eyes were fixed on a prize that no Viking had ever dared claim, the throne of the Eastern Roman Empire itself. The exile had arrived. Now the real war would begin. Could a landless Viking prince truly dream of conquering the heir to Rome itself? What made Harald believe he could succeed where countless others had failed? Share your thoughts on ambition versus reality in the comments below. Emperor Michael IV the Paphlagonian studied the tall Viking warrior standing before his golden throne with calculating eyes. Reports had reached the palace of this Harald's prowess, how he had single-handedly held a river crossing against 50 Pecheneg raiders, how his tactical genius had saved a Byzantine merchant convoy from total annihilation. "You seek service in our guard?" the emperor asked through his interpreter, his Greek honeyed with skepticism. Harald's reply was simple: "I seek to serve the greatest empire on earth. Give me enemies to kill, and I will make you rich with their gold." The Varangian Guard was the emperor's personal elite, an axe-wielding brotherhood of Nordic warriors who served as the last line of defense for the Purple Throne. For 3 centuries, these Viking mercenaries had earned a reputation as the most fearsome soldiers in the known world. They swore blood oaths of loyalty to the emperor alone, and their axes had decided the fate of dynasties. Harald was inducted into their ranks with a traditional ceremony, a scarification ritual where hot iron carved runic symbols into his flesh, marking him as property of the empire. But where other warriors saw service, Harald saw opportunity. Every campaign would teach him Byzantine politics, every battle would expand his network of allies, every victory would add to his growing legend. His first assignment came quickly. The Bulgars had risen in revolt, threatening the empire's northern borders. Harald led his Varangian brothers into battle with a ferocity that shocked even veteran Byzantine generals. At the Battle of Ostrovo, his tactical brilliance turned certain defeat into crushing victory. He didn't just defeat the Bulgarian army, he annihilated it so completely that survivors spoke of a golden-haired demon who fought with the fury of the old gods. But Harald's true genius lay not in his battle prowess, but in what he did after victory. While other Varangians celebrated with wine and women, Harald studied. He learned Greek, mastered Byzantine law, cultivated relationships with senators and generals. Most importantly, he began understanding the intricate web of court politics that truly controlled the empire. Within 2 years, this exile from Norway had become the most trusted foreign warrior in Constantinople. The emperor showered him with gold, noble titles, and responsibility. But Harald's hunger was far from satisfied. How does a foreign mercenary infiltrate the highest levels of an ancient empire? What skills beyond fighting does it take to build real power? Let us know your theories about Harold's strategy in the comments. When Emperor Michael VI ascended the throne in 1041, he faced a crisis that threatened to tear the empire apart. Sicily, the empire's wealthiest western province, had erupted in revolt. Norman adventurers, led by the brilliant Robert Guiscard, had allied with local rebels and were systematically conquering Byzantine territories. The emperor turned to his most successful general, Harold Hardrada. "Reclaim Sicily for the empire," Michael commanded, "and name your reward." Harold's response would echo through history, "I want nothing that cannot be taken by right of conquest." The Sicilian campaigns would prove to be Harold's masterpiece of military strategy. Leading a combined force of Varangians, Byzantine regulars, and allied troops, he transformed guerrilla warfare into an art form. His tactics were revolutionary: lightning raids on Norman supply lines, psychological warfare that turned allies against each other, and siege techniques that borrowed from both Viking and Byzantine traditions. At the Siege of Syracuse, Harold demonstrated the cunning that would make him legendary. Faced with impregnable walls and a determined garrison, he didn't waste lives in futile assaults. Instead, he had his men capture small birds from the surrounding countryside, attach burning materials to their feet, and release them back toward the city. The birds, seeking their nests in the wooden roofs, set the entire city ablaze from within. Syracuse fell in a single night. But Harold's greatest victory was yet to come. At the Battle of Troina, facing Robert Guiscard himself, Harold employed a tactic that would be studied by military scholars for centuries. He feigned retreat, drawing the Norman heavy cavalry into a carefully prepared trap, then struck from three sides simultaneously. The Norman army was utterly destroyed, and Guiscard barely escaped with his life. Victory followed victory. Palermo, Messina, Catania, one by one, the Sicilian cities fell to Harold's strategic brilliance. The Norman invasion was crushed, and Byzantine authority restored across the island. But more importantly, Harold had proven himself capable of independent command on the grandest scale. The emperor was so impressed that he granted Harold an unprecedented honor, the right to marry into the imperial family itself. Suddenly, the exiled Viking prince was no longer just a successful general. He was family to the purple-born, with a legitimate claim to the throne itself. Can military genius alone elevate a foreigner to the heights of imperial power? What does Harold's success in Sicily reveal about the nature of political ambition? Share your insights below. By 1043, Harold Hardrada had achieved something no foreign warrior in Byzantine history had managed. He had become indispensable. His victories in Sicily had restored imperial prestige, his tactical innovations had revolutionized the army, and his political marriages had woven him into the very fabric of imperial nobility. But Harold's greatest achievement was economic. During his decade of service, he had systematically amassed a fortune that dwarfed the treasuries of most Western kingdoms. Beyond his generous military salary, Harold had received a share of all conquered territories, percentages of trade revenues from restored provinces, and gifts from grateful emperors. By some estimates, his personal wealth equaled that of entire nations. This gold was more than treasure, it was power in its purest form. In the Byzantine system, wealth translated directly to political influence. Harold used his riches to purchase loyalty among senators, fund private armies, and establish a network of allies that stretched from the Bosphorus to the Black Sea. His mansion in Constantinople became a rival court to the imperial palace itself. Foreign dignitaries, ambitious generals, and influential merchants all sought audiences with the Viking who commanded the emperor's ear. Harold held symposiums where he discussed philosophy with Greek scholars, strategy with veteran generals, and statecraft with seasoned politicians. But beneath the civilized veneer, Harold remained fundamentally Viking. He never forgot that true power came from the edge of a blade, not the weight of gold. His personal guard consisted entirely of hand-picked Varangians who would die before allowing harm to come to their leader. His palace was a fortress, his servants were spies, and his allies knew that betraying Harold Hardrada meant facing the wrath of the most dangerous man in the empire. The other noble families began to whisper. How had this northern barbarian accumulated such influence? What were his true intentions? Most importantly, what would happen when the current emperor died and the succession crisis inevitably began? Harold heard the whispers, and he smiled. Let them wonder. Let them fear. He had spent a decade learning their weaknesses, understanding their divisions, and positioning himself for the moment when everything would change. That moment was coming sooner than anyone imagined. When does a foreign general become too powerful for an empire to control? How does accumulated wealth transform into political threat? Drop your analysis of Harold's strategy in the comments. In 1050, Emperor Constantine IX Monomachos lay dying, and the empire held its breath. The succession was uncertain, the treasury was strained from constant warfare, and various factions within the court were already maneuvering for power. Harold Hardrada watched these developments with the calculating patience of a predator. As commander of the Varangian Guard, Harold controlled the military force that had historically decided disputed successions. His men were absolutely loyal to him personally, not to the imperial office. This gave him leverage that transcended traditional Byzantine politics. He wasn't just a player in the succession game, he could determine its outcome. Secret meetings began in Harold's palace. Senators who had grown wealthy under his protection whispered of a new vision for the empire. What if, instead of choosing between weak claimants from the established families, they selected someone with proven military genius and unlimited resources? Someone who had already demonstrated his ability to expand and defend imperial territories? The conspiracy that emerged was breathtaking in its scope. Harold had cultivated allies in the Senate, the military, the church, and the merchant classes. His gold had purchased loyalty across every level of Byzantine society. When Constantine finally died, Harold would have the support necessary to claim the Purple Throne for himself. But Harold faced a fundamental challenge that no amount of gold or military prowess could overcome. He was still a foreigner. The Byzantine nobility, despite their respect for his achievements, could never truly accept a Viking barbarian as heir to Caesar's legacy. The Orthodox Church, despite Harold's public conversion to Christianity, questioned the sincerity of his faith. The common people, despite benefiting from his military successes, saw him as an outsider. As the emperor's condition worsened, Harold made the most crucial decision of his political career. Rather than risk a civil war that might destroy everything he had built, he chose to retreat with honor intact. He would return to Norway, claim his ancestral throne, and use his Byzantine wealth and experience to forge a Nordic empire that could rival Constantinople itself. But first, he had one final obligation to fulfill. The emperor's death would trigger chaos, and Harold's Varangian oath demanded that he protect the imperial family during the transition. Only after ensuring a stable succession could he honorably depart. Was Harold's decision to withdraw strategic genius or missed opportunity? Could he have actually claimed the Byzantine throne, or was he right to recognize the insurmountable obstacles? Share your verdict on his choice. When Harold Hardrada finally departed Constantinople in 1043, he took with him more than gold. He carried the accumulated wisdom of the world's most sophisticated empire. His ships groaned under the weight of Byzantine treasure, but his mind carried something far more valuable, a complete understanding of how power truly functioned at the highest levels of civilization. The Norway Harold returned to was a far different land than the one he had fled as an exile. His nephew Magnus had died, leaving the throne vulnerable to challenge. Harold's return was perfectly timed. He possessed the resources to purchase loyalty, the military experience to command respect, and the political sophistication to navigate royal politics. But Harold had learned patience during his Byzantine years. Rather than seize the crown through violence, he negotiated a power-sharing agreement with Magnus' successor, his own nephew Magnus the Good. For several years, Harold served as co-king, using this time to consolidate his position and modernize the Norwegian military according to Byzantine principles. When Magnus died in 1047, Harold finally achieved his birthright, sole rule over Norway. But the kingdom he inherited was merely the beginning of his ambitions. His decades in the Byzantine Empire had shown him what was possible when military genius combined with unlimited resources and sophisticated statecraft. Harold transformed Norway into the dominant power in northern Europe. His armies, trained in Byzantine tactics and equipped with Eastern weapons, conquered territory from Denmark to the Orkney Islands. His treasury, swollen with Constantinople gold, funded infrastructure projects that rivaled anything in Western Europe. His court became a center of learning and culture that attracted scholars and artists from across the known world. Yet Harold's greatest legacy was not territorial or economic, it was inspirational. He had proven that a Viking warrior could rise to challenge the mightiest empires on earth. His saga inspired generations of Norse adventurers to dream beyond their fjords and seek glory in distant lands. The exile who had fled Norway with nothing had returned as Harald Hardrada, Hard Ruler, one of the most powerful monarchs in medieval Europe. His Byzantine adventure had transformed not just his own destiny, but the entire trajectory of Scandinavian history. Could Harald have achieved the same success without his Byzantine experience? How did his time in the empire shape his later rule of Norway? Share your thoughts on how foreign experience transforms leadership. The saga of Harald Hardrada stands as one of history's greatest tales of ambition realized. From exiled prince to Varangian guard, from foreign mercenary to near emperor, from landless warrior to king of Norway, his journey proves that in the medieval world, individual genius could still reshape the destiny of nations. Harald's time in Byzantium revealed both the possibilities and limitations of personal ambition. While he never wore the purple, he achieved something perhaps more valuable. He learned to think like an emperor while retaining the spirit of a Viking. This unique combination made him one of the most formidable rulers of his age. His legacy lives on not just in the chronicles of Norway, but in the very stones of Constantinople, where legends still whisper of the Viking who almost became Caesar. The northern warrior had conquered something greater than territory or treasure. He had conquered impossibility itself. If this epic tale of ambition and power inspired you, subscribe for more legendary stories from the medieval world. Like this video if you believe that individual brilliance can overcome any obstacle, and comment below with your favorite moment from Harald's incredible journey. Until next time, may your own ambitions prove as unstoppable as the Vikings who dared to dream of empire.